Every dollar in your pocket, every digital trade in the sky, and the entire weight of the global economy rests on the shoulders of just one person. For over 200 years, only 79 individuals have held the keys to the American vault. This is the epic story of the U.S. Treasury. It begins in 1789 with a vision and a duel. Alexander Hamilton. He didn't just manage money, he invented a nation's credit out of thin air. He was followed by Oliver Wolcott Jr. and Samuel Dexter, men who struggled to keep a young republic afloat while the ink on the Constitution was still wet. Then came Albert Gallatin, the longest-serving secretary in history. He funded the Louisiana Purchase, doubling the size of America with a single stroke of his pen. Imagine that. Every acre of the West bought and paid for by the Treasury. But the peace wouldn't last. Through George Campbell and Alexander Dallas, the War of 1812 pushed the nation to the brink of bankruptcy. William Crawford and Richard Rush navigated the recovery, but the 1830s brought a new kind of war. Samuel Ingham, Louis McLean, and William Duane found themselves caught in Andrew Jackson's brutal crusade against the National Bank. Roger Taney and Levi Woodbury watched as the economy collapsed into the Panic of 1837. Thomas Ewing and Walter Forward tried to stabilize a fractured system, followed by John Spencer and George Bibb. By the time Robert Walker and William Meredith took office, the country was expanding toward the Pacific, but a darker shadow was falling. Thomas Corwin, James Guthrie, Howell Cobb, and Philip Thomas served a nation on the verge of tearing itself apart. Then came the fire. 1861, Salmon P. Chase. He had to fund a civil war to save the Union. His solution? The very first greenbacks. He put his own face on the $1 bill while the country bled. William Fessenden and Hugh McCulloch oversaw the transition to peace, but the Gilded Age was a roller coaster of silver and gold. George Boutwell, William Richardson, and Benjamin Bristow fought corruption in the Panic of 1873. Lot Morrill and John Sherman returned the country to the gold standard, leading into the industrial boom of William Windom and Charles Folger. Walter Gresham, Hugh McCulloch's second term, and Daniel Manning steered the ship as steel and rail transformed the landscape. But the cycles of boom and bust continued under Charles Fairchild and William Windom's return. Charles Foster and John Carlyle faced the devastating Panic of 1893. Then the dawn of a new century. Lyman Gage and Leslie Shaw saw America become a global power. George Cortelyou and Franklin McVeigh managed the transition into the modern era. But here is where everything changed. 1913. William Gibbs McAdoo oversaw the birth of the Federal Reserve. The game was no longer just about printing money. It was about controlling the heartbeat of the world. Carter Glass, David Houston, and Andrew Mellon led the Roaring Twenties. Mellon watched the markets soar to impossible heights, only to see the floor vanish in 1929. Ogden Mills and the legendary Henry Morgenthau Jr. were next. Morgenthau didn't just fund the New Deal. He financed the greatest war machine in human history to defeat tyranny. After the smoke cleared, Fred Vinson and John Snyder helped build the post-war world order at Bretton Woods. George Humphrey, Robert Anderson, and Douglas Dillon managed the Cold War economy, where the dollar became the undisputed king of the planet. But cracks began to show. Henry Fowler and Joseph Barr saw the rising tide of inflation. Then John Connolly famously told the world that the dollar was America's currency, but the world's problem. George Shultz and William Simon navigated the oil shocks of the 70s, followed by Michael Blumenthal and G. William Miller. Then came the 1980s. Donald Reagan and James Baker fueled the era of deregulation and massive growth. Nicholas Brady and Lloyd Benson led us into the 90s, where Robert Rubin and Lawrence Summers presided over a rare moment of budget surpluses and a booming tech revolution. But the new millennium brought new shadows. Paul O'Neill and Jon Snow faced the aftermath of 9/11. Then came 2008, Henry Paulson, the man who had to look into the abyss and decide which banks lived and which died. Timothy Geithner and Jack Lew took the torch through the long recovery. Stephen Mnuchin managed the unprecedented shocks of a global pandemic. And then Janet Yellen, the first woman to ever command the Treasury. As we move toward 2026, the faces change, but the mission remains. From handwritten ledgers to high-frequency digital trades, these 79 people have steered the American experiment through every storm. The names change, the currency evolves, but the responsibility is eternal. This is the gold standard of leadership.